we got some rivalry games now. We will start with the one that I will be covering in person because it is only a few miles from my house, but it is of radical significance to the local community and also to the visiting team because Tennessee has not won at Florida since 2003. Yes, we all remember the big Casey Clausen to James Banks Hail Mary at the end of the first half. I don't think anybody remembers that, but that happened, and it did set up the win for Tennessee over a Ron Zook-led Gators team. So 6.5-point underdog, Florida at home in a game that Billy Napier needs. We had Nick Delatorre from Gators Online on the show yesterday. He explained that this is probably the most winnable of Florida's rivalry games. Billy Napier went 0 for the rivalry games last year. If you want to have the rivals be Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida State, 0-3. If you want to add LSU into that, it's 0-4. So this looks like the easiest one, and it's not easy, of all of those this year too. Parker, what do you think about this one?
The first thought that jumps out at me here is Joe Milton. Where are the deep balls, my man? We talked about it all off season. We talked about the arm strength. I saw you throw that orange. You've thrown 9 deep balls, and 8 of them have been over the middle of the field. That's not the PI outside, go get it. Either it's a touchdown or we get 15 with the flag offense that we've come to expect out of Heupel there. So I need to see more downfield from Joe Milton here. And I'm wondering if Tennessee is not an example of maybe holding the little things back, knowing that they have this game early here. Looking at the preview, Florida's defense, 76th in EPA per rush. That does include some scrambles against that Utah team. 72nd in EPA per pass. So not much better there either way. One thing that I'm really looking at, Florida's good at the success rate, right? Again, I'm a little bit more conservative early with those success rate numbers. We regress those to the mean, but Florida doing all right with the information we have, but they're allowing the big play. That's what's wrong with the EPA. When we have that EPA higher than success rate, that means giving up those big plays. So I'm really interested in how Florida's defense can stand up if Tennessee's going to test them, if Tennessee's going to try to spread them out and put them in that PI or TD kind of scenario there. On the other side, I don't know what to make of Graham Mertz. A lot of big volume numbers, but if you look at that, he was down 3 scores, and most of those yards, I think 60% of those yards came in the last 3 drives of the game against Utah there. So a lot of that was kind of losing effort, just putting up some stats. I'm not really optimistic about it. 23rd in EPA per rush, 74th in EPA per pass for Florida. I really am not sure they're going to be able to score enough to really outpace themselves if this Tennessee offense can get into that high gear. That being said, the voodoo of the swamp is not something that you can mitigate, you can forget about, you can just write off. We know that in a rivalry game, especially with Billy Napier needing it, there's going to be a lot of competition here.
Yeah, I can tell you how the fan base feels based on just living in this town and hearing people talk. They're basically putting all their eggs into this basket. And as a lady at the gym put it today to somebody else, she was working out, and I'm eavesdropping. She says, well, it's either we're going to be really happy or I'm going to see you next year. And that's probably sums up the whole vibe in Gainesville. And with Joe Milton, it's interesting because I think the lack of deep balls, I agree it may be a little holding some stuff back, but also maybe a little fear of him airmailing some things. And then you get into bad down and distance situations when you can run the ball pretty well against Austin Peay and against Virginia. So just stay ahead of the sticks if you can. And actually, they were pretty inaccurate early in the Austin Peay game. I think he was 1 for his first 11. So that's the part I think for Tennessee fans, that is the fear, is he's going to have that egg-laying game where he's missing open receivers or he's overthrowing and there's a safety sitting back there ready to intercept it. I think that's the big fear. And this will be a chance for him to show that he can do that in a hostile environment. And, it was weird. I had completely forgotten about this. Graham Mertz and Joe Milton have started against one another before.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
2020 in Michigan Stadium in front of 600 people.
What a weird year forever. Like, yeah, that's wild. And yeah, it's crazy. It's testament what the SEC's become, where they're trying to, get these guys on the second, in their second act there. That's really, really funny. I hadn't put together that they had started there.
I had completely forgotten it. I had memory hold that whole
Yeah.
thing. I remember Graham Mertz's first game, the one on the Friday night when they're just opening Big Ten play, and he was almost perfect. I think he only had one incompletion, but then the rest of that season for him was a nightmare. And Joe, same thing.
Game day the next week said, and I won't point any fingers at anyone. Game day the next week said, is it more likely that Graham Mertz gets benched or wins the Heisman? And multiple people said wins the Heisman.
Oh man. Well, they did have like half the people picking TCU in the national title game last year too. So sometimes you just got to start a conversation.
Exactly. We're just out here making content. I get it. I respect it. Absolutely. I am also worried a little bit about Tennessee's receivers. Just take it back to the game there too. You lose Hyatt, you lose Tillman, and it's not like they have bad players there. Squirrel White and Brew McCoy are fine. Keaton has gotten the third most targets there. Those guys are kind of far and away. But, you do need dudes in the Heupel offense. You need guys who can go up, who can position their body, control their body well, and really challenge. And so we've got to see that from these guys. An unproven group for Tennessee. If things are going wrong, it's because Joe Milton's not accurate. It's because these wide receivers aren't creating separation.
Yeah, and I don't know if anybody from Florida can get to Joe Milton. That's the other thing is Florida's pass rush. It may be the young guys have to come forward. Like Kelby Collins, who's a freshman, he's played some snaps so far, but he may need to be the guy that emerges, because they don't really have in the veteran ranks, they don't really have anybody who's special off the edge. He could be, based on recruiting hype, measurables, all that stuff, and what little we've seen so far. But they need something like that. Meanwhile, Tennessee is very fast off the edge on defense and has been very disruptive so far. And that should scare Florida into trying to establish the run and not abandoning it, because that was, I think, one of the more frustrating things to watch in the Utah game was they couldn't get anything going on the ground and essentially turn the screen game into the run game. And that was, I mean, when you're playing as Kyle Whittingham, he sees right through that.
Yeah, because with the screen, a lot of times you're hoping maybe I can just get an angle to make a play, and then I'll get this defender to not make a sound fundamental tackle. And I'm here to tell you that that's not a plus EV bet for against the Kyle Whittingham team there. And I love that point, Andy. I think that's one thing I've really gotten from talking to coaches and really learning about college football a little bit more is the substitution aspect between the screen and the run game is so important to look at. Those aren't passes. Those are designed runs that are just a little different. If Florida has to go out that way because of pressure or because of they can't get the running game, I'm really worried about it. Graham Mertz, 38.5% pressure to sack ratio. He can get disrupted so easily. If Florida gets off their game plan, really, what is your recourse?
Yeah. Another thing Nick Del Torre reminded us of, and I think this is really interesting, Florida has not yet played a team that goes lightning fast like Tennessee does. Florida's rotated a ton of guys in on defense, and that's been helpful because they don't have that special talent. They need to get the younger guys reps. They need to find out if any of them are going to be special. But they have, their noses are 360 pounds and 440 pounds. And if one of them gets stuck on the field and can't get off, that's 2 plays and they're done. Like, if you run 6 plays in a row, 4 of those are going to be 11 on 10.
Yep, definitely a consideration there, getting the big boys out. And I mean, it's not like Tennessee's run game has been, bad at all. They can go fast, but 18th in EPA per rush, 9th in rushing success rate, again, adjusted for kind of early season stuff. So Tennessee can run it all and really kind of confuse Florida, make Florida dependent on the situations, and then really ramp up the tempo. You could see this thing getting out of hand.
I can, and that's the part that I don't want to see a town entirely apathetic toward football, but I think that's probably what happens if that happens. I was optimistic about Florida. I drank a little bit of the Kool-Aid before the Utah game. I don't think I'm going to need them to show it to me now. So I am going to take Tennessee to cover this one.
Yeah, I think I'm agreeing with you there. It's at 6.5 right now. I would go even up to a 7.5 here.
Yeah, it was 7.5. And so some folks got in on Florida and they were hearing some stuff I wasn't. So maybe they know something we don't. But thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.